Now we will have Hedieh Keshavarz from Polytechnique, Montreal present. Her presentation is titled Piloting the National Survey. Hedieh has been working on developing MJ's National Survey for about a year now and has quite a lot of work to report on. That is all very exciting. So with that, I am happy to turn it over to you, Hedieh. The floor is yours.
Thanks. I just wonder if you can see my screen now. Perfect. Okay, so hello everyone. Today I'm gonna talk about piloting the national survey, which is a part of A1 working group. This is led by Hedieh Hassan and Professor Catherine Morancy, and I am a master's student at Polytechnique Montreal, working under supervision of Professor Morancy. And so first of all, an introduction to what national survey is. So A1 working group is working on implementation of a survey on transportation poverty and transportation related social exclusion in Canada. This is to kind of understand transportation barriers and suppress demand, and it's a sufficientarian framework to explore what combination of transport provision can be considered a necessary baseline. There are 5 themes of interest in this survey, starting with barriers, well-being and outcome, satisfaction and mismatch, suppressed and unwanted travel, and aspiration. We are now in the process of designing the pilot survey. Just to let you know, it's not done yet. We are just now brainstorming on different elements to be included in the survey to make sure we are in line with MJ objectives. To design the survey, this is the scheme of different components that we will include in the survey, starting with descriptive elements, which is like the easiest part, but very important because we're gonna capture basic information on the location people live, the household structure, the size of the household, the age, gender, car ownership, driver's license, position, and also looking into the respondent profile about the things that is accessible to them, that occupation they have, do they have access to a smartphone, and what limitations they are experiencing, and also main activity locations and the transportation modes that they use already. And then the very important part that we are now brainstorming on is the second one in orange. It's the questions on the perception and aspiration. We are thinking on developing 3 or more scenarios in order to test which questions can better assess our objectives and can be more kind of meaningful in terms of duration, because we want high response rate to build our plans in the future. And then lastly, we'll ask some questions to measure the burden, the perceived burden, and also the complexity of the questions. And okay, starting with the first element, which is descriptive question. So here is the platform and also the graphical interface that the survey will be launched on. These are some example questions from the COVID survey that it's under process, I think. So as you see, the question how many people live in your household, what is the location of your household, how old are you, what is your main occupation? Actually, these are the questions that are going to be like the most easiest one to answer. And then about the activity places and the modes people use. And then jumping into the second component of the survey. To develop these questions, we thought of anchor points, which are 4 anchor points. We chose them to be like close to the real life experience. So it starts from the home location, what people, like where people live, the dueling itself and what is around. And then the mobility aspect, like when people try, like when the trip starts, and then the destinations they reach and how they feel about all of this. And by these, we will propose different scenarios, and we'll look at all these anchor points from different lenses, from different mindsets, like aspiration, satisfaction, barriers, trade-off, suppressed and unwanted activities, to see like which scenario can be more helpful for the future planning. First, we thought of very generic, easy questions to address all of these like mindsets. For example, to question satisfaction, we thought of like wanting people to rank like how they are happy or unhappy with some features of their neighborhood, doing anything, or like the question like I am able, or I can do this, I can participate, I can accomplish, I can access as much as I would like, to capture if like people are close to their aspiration or they are sacrificing things. And also to see the mismatch, like a question like I would rather do that, I wish I could do that, I wish I had access to. And about trade-offs, like I'm losing this because of this, I'm giving up on X because of Y, I'm sacrificing this, or I do these things because of this. Very like easy, generic structure. And then about safety, like I feel safe from profiling, I feel safe from traffic accidents, and or I'm concerned about this. Now, starting with the first anchor point, we thought that, like regarding the home location, the first subcategory is the dueling attribute itself. So we thought of questioning these attributes to see how people feel about the place they live in terms of affordability, in terms of size, type, parking, other amenities they have, and to see are they satisfied? Can they afford their dueling? Some concept like I would rather pay less for my dueling. I would rather live in another neighborhood and another dueling, or I would rather to have access to this, or I'm giving up on my like dueling size to be close to city center, to like different amenities. The questions to kind of we kind of get what trade-offs people make because of their dueling, and like how they're like kind of sacrificing what they aspire. And then after the dueling attribute itself, we thought of the second subcategory, which is the neighborhood. So after asking the descriptive questions that like think of 3, 5, maybe more destinations that are more important to you or you frequently visit, these are rather than jobs or employment, most of the amenities around. We ask people to say to what extent do they agree with the following. So I can access, for example, I can access the amenities in a like 15 minutes walking distance, 15-minute walk. I can access with transit, I can ride a bike, the opening hours matches my needs, or they are affordable or not, I am satisfied with the service quality, or I have to, for example, because the quality is not good, I have to make longer trips to access the things that I'm more satisfied with the qualified, which kind of gets the unwanted travel in itself. And then Another aspect is the social cohesion, which is like a very important part, because it's very important to look at neighborhood in the lens of how people think they belong to the place and the neighborhood they live in. Are they able to trust their neighbors or engage in communication with them, or just they feel they are fish out of water? Because these all can kind of affect their satisfaction with life at the end. Then asking about barriers. So here we have a list of barriers that kind of try to include all the things in 5 categories. So the barriers like social and institutional, digital and transactional, design and active travel barrier, safety barriers that can, like this has some aspects of the other one in it, and cognitive and psychological barriers. And we thought of asking the question like this, like in my neighborhood, I feel safe from crime, I feel safe from traffic accident, or the design is universal, I have a safe pedestrian access, or I can understand the signs, or I cannot understand the signs because of the language, or how confident they feel about like using the transit, everything that is around them. And by considering all the elements that are discussed in the previous slides, this is the final scheme. The most important one is transportation services and infrastructure, which will be addressed in the second section. And again, with all of these elements, with all of these things that we have here, we want to look at them from the lens of satisfaction, from the lens of aspiration, well-being, to capture mismatch, to capture how people really feel and how they would like to access, and are they accessing it. And then jumping into the second anchor, which is the mobility, we start with the ownership. So it's important to see how people feel about their ownership as that. Are they happy? Do they wish to have access to more cars? Or they, for example, sentences like that, I wish that I did not own a car, or I wish I had a car of my own, which I don't need to share with other family members, or things that I have to spend longer time on traveling, that I desire since I cannot afford a car, or something like I am forced to own a car, which I barely afford, but this is the only way that can get me to school, to work, etc. And then about shared services, we ask kind of the questions to capture how people are satisfied with their membership. Are they a member? Do they want to be a member, but they don't have access to it? They want to be a member, but they cannot afford it. So like the feeling and the barriers that may exist in terms of their membership in shared services. And then about infrastructure. So looking into a trip, first of all, we need to if using public transit, the first thing is to get to the station. This part will kind of infrastructure, I meant that part. And this will, here will be some questions about the quality of the pedestrian pass, or is it safe? How safe people will feel when they are reaching the station? How they feel about the noise, greenery, pollution level, everything. And then about public, again, under public transit, about the station itself, is the station accessible to them? Or are there information on board that they can easily follow? Are there purchase a station, or they have to walk here, for example, here in Montreal, if there is a bus stop close to me, there is not a station, so I have to go to a metro station, for example, to purchase a transit pass, and this may be a barrier for me as a person who doesn't live close to metro. So these are the things that we are trying to capture. And then the service itself, so there have been multiple literature on like assessing the service quality by asking question like the public transportation available in my neighborhood are affordable, are reliable, are frequently accessible to me, frequently accessible to someone with reduced mobility, are easy to understand, are safe, and are available. Like, and also the perceived value of the services also has been questioned in literature a lot, like how people feel about what they pay and what they gain from the transit service. And the last element is the mode choice. So it depends on the mode, like by asking the factual elements, like what do you have access to in your neighborhood, and then how frequently do you use different modes, and then we can ask like what are the motivations that you choose this mode. Is it quick? Is it expensive? Is it the only mode accessible to you? Or it's like because of you're trying to avoid crowding, or because there is, for example, no parking available at a destination, you choose driving. Sorry, you choose not to drive. And then we ask, there is like a tricky question here, then we ask like, now considering the mode that you frequently use, tell us that like, is it your preferred mode? And if not, why? What is the reason that you are kind of not using the mode that you really prefer? And then we get the mismatch concept here, and we understand what barriers exist. And at the end, this will be the scheme that includes all the mobility variables and components in regards to the second anchor points that we have. And then we have well-being. So what people feel in all of this, like in their dwelling, in their neighborhood, in the transit service. And to do this, we thought of different outcomes that people will get from what they have access to, what is available to them. We'll question, we have planned to question subjective well-being by asking question like this. I'm missing a slide here. Yes, this one. Yes, about subjective well-being, like how happy or satisfied are you with the following? Is it like, I'm satisfied with my personal travel options, I'm satisfied with my health, I am satisfied with the sense of contribution of myself to the society, or my ability to keep my social stand and build wealth. And then we go to the employment and educational outcomes. So for example, are you able to access your employment and perform your job effectively? Or for example, does the transportation options available to you, or the place that you live, make you to limit your search radius, or you experience missed or delayed work days or school days, which are the like can kind of be suppressed travel? Or you may like spend a lot more time on traveling that you'd rather, which is kind of an unwanted travel, and also like being the opposite of your aspiration. And then about social outcomes, participation, health and financial outcomes, we can ask questions like this. So to what extent do you agree with the following? I can say with the transportation's options available to me, I can participate like community and social events, like after school campus events, cultural events, as much as I would like, or I can reach to recovery. I can reach recovery meetings. I can reach healthcare centers as much as I need. And then we can ask some questions to directly address suppressed travel. So by asking like this, with the transportation options available to you, like, are you experiencing missed or delayed appointments? or like saying that I feel being forced to use a mode that I do not prefer. I have difficulty with my participation activities. I have to spend more time on travel that I would like. I have to pay more on travel that I would like. I can barely afford it. Or I have to, like, for example, cut from my leisure time because of long travel hours. We thought of like asking these questions like this, that people can express their, like, we can put ourselves in their shoes and they can express their feelings by like saying that for example, I have to cut from my, like, I have to not to go to gym because I spend 2 hours on public transit from work, to and from work. And then on unwanted travel, again, this kind of a similar question. I am forced to own a car. I am giving up on reaching some destinations because transit is not available. So for example, I am buying my grocery from the store that I'm not satisfied with the quality, but I cannot go to the grocery store. I cannot afford, I don't have time to go to the place that I like. And also it's important to ask how much like people experience this suppressed and unwanted activities, to have a bit, because like if we ask people like, have you ever missed a delayed like work or school, it's a yes always. So it's important to ask like how much you're experiencing. Is it happening on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or if just once a year, which like in some cases acceptable. And at the end, this is gonna be the schematic presentation of all well-beings and satisfaction on suppressed and unwanted travel. And lastly, the destination. This is very close to the elements discussed as like in the neighborhood barrier section, because it's more of the infrastructure and accessibility to public transit, and the coverage of public transit in the destinations we aim to go. And I think the biggest challenge in designing the survey is that we need to cover multiple elements, and we also have to make sure that what we are asking can really help us to plan and make decisions. So in terms of our questionnaire, we also need to make some trade-offs, some sacrifices to kind of, we cannot ask all of these questions, obvious, but we have to find the best ways to pose the questions to make sure that we have an acceptable participation rate at the end. And lastly, we'll pose some questions on respondent burden. I had a presentation on previous day of symposium on respondent burden, but here is like a very short slide of what is gonna be asked at the end of the survey to see how exactly people felt about the survey itself. So questions like, do you feel that the length of the today's survey was too long, too short, or about right? How long do you think it take to fill out this survey? Was it interesting to you? Was it difficult to you? How burdensome you thought it was? And have you ever in some point like tempted to drop the survey? If yes, at which point? So we can kind of measure this perceived burden and compare it to the actual burden, which can give us some kind of instructions on how to build up a question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hedieh, for that really thorough presentation. I'd like to open the floor to questions, if anybody in the audience has questions. Ahmed, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. This is very nice and exciting to see that you're will be applying this all over Canada. There's a lot of questions. What's the timing? And what's the fatigue do you think will happen with that? Because you have too many questions. So that's all. We always have to balance that. People might get tired, and we always so what did you think about the timing?
Yes, actually, so what we thought, because like I said, on the other hand, I'm working on the response burden and like see how like what is the ideal timing of a questionnaire for a respondent to fill out. So we are thinking of something less than 20 minutes because according to previous literature, if we go beyond this timing, we will have a lot of dropouts. And also our data will be biased because some people will just like answer the questions without thinking really about it. But the thing is that, as I said, we are not going to include all of these questions in our survey. That's why we have different scenarios. So what we are thinking that like pull all of this question in a pool and make choices and have like 3 or more scenarios, and we'll test them to see which one is associated with like higher response rate and less burden, to decide which like what is gonna be the optimal one, because
Okay.
like
So like doing a random number, and then based on the random number, you get people into 3-4 passes, for example.
yes,
Something like that. And
Yes.
then you see how's the response rate in each pass and how the dropout in each path. Something like that. Okay.
yes,
Yeah. To see how, and also to cut timing. It's good that you're thinking about the timing to be less than 20. That's reasonable. That's
Yeah.
well done.
thanks.
Dan, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just wonder about the consistency kind of question that Ahmed brought up earlier. Has there been any thought of kind of doing a matrix between the systematic review that we just saw and the kinds of questions that we're asking? Because I saw in some instances you were citing specific measures, obviously, that have been developed and in theory validated. And in other instances, it seems like we're developing our own questions and kind of doing that. And I think both of those things are fine. But I wonder if there's a way to think about like, we're trying to ask about, you know, unmet transportation demand or unnecessary trips or other kinds of concepts. If we could, rather than completely invent our own questions, if we could go to the systematic review and say, what's the most common method to do that's been used to do this kind of thing? How are we asking it? How consistent is that with, you know, what's been done in the literature? Has that been done, or have you thought about kind of trying to think about that? Or for those new questions that we were developing, is it really kind of ad hoc?
Yeah, so about that yet, like actually we thought about like how we, I think what you mean about like how we word the questions, and we thought about on those scenarios we will have like in some point we thought of asking questions like in a negative way, so like just asking what barriers do you face in your neighborhood on your like transportation that you are frequently uses, and then we thought. Then we ask, well, what are you satisfied with in your neighborhood? So these are two, like we are addressing the same kind of elements by asking the question in 2 ways. So we looked at previous literatures and they also kind of did that. What we are aiming for is that we kind of pose questions in 2 ways. And again, in the pilot survey, we see how how the response rate and how like the duration works by asking this, because we don't want people to feel like not comfortable. And what we understood, like being positive can help us better kind of capture the aspiration element. So yes, we'll test this, but maybe in some questions we'll just go ahead and say that okay, what they did in previous literature, this is kind of the best way, the ideal way of asking these questions. And sometimes we'll kind of produce our new ways of posing these questions.
I can just jump in and add that there have been several touch points between the systematic lit review team and the national survey team, and I think we're probably going to continue that collaboration. But ultimately, I imagine we will defer to whatever the testing this fall sort of tells us, right? Okay, William, I saw your hand up.
Unmute is best. Thank you. Very, very interesting. I have 2 questions. One is about the sample design for the questionnaire. I mean, we have several travel surveys that are done periodically in the major cities across Canada. And we have the StatCan household travel survey, which is done, I'm not sure what the frequency is. Will your sample design mirror or match or be congruent with any of these other sample designs? To see, I mean, that would make the results more comparable across the various surveys. And the second question is regarding your very last touch point was on control variables, and you indicated income. And so I was curious to know how you were going to ask about income, and if you were going to ask about different sources of income, whether employment or else other sources. Thank you.
Thanks. So on this question, may I ask, I have some limited knowledge, so I'll ask my professor to.
I'm coming. So actually for the pilot survey, this is not an issue right now because we won't be controlling for the sample, but for the national survey, what was first imagined is that we use a panel in which there is the income will be the filtering variable. Someone's at my door, that's funny. So it will be based, so we're targeting low income for the national survey based on panel. So the question of travel surveys, so StatCan doesn't do travel surveys. A lot of metropolitan areas do travel surveys. I am aware of many of them on the way they use the sample, and the idea is really to have a representative sample based on home location, age, gender, and household size. This is typically what is done. So they target, so it's address-based sampling, which is the most recent approach due to a lot of things. So the idea here is really to target vulnerable group, so that the sampling is not the same. The recruitment strategy will not be the same. So we will not have a control group. We're hoping to be representative of the vulnerable group at first. Of course, if we get more funding, we can probably target other areas and increase the sample size to have a control group. And we will also hope to get maybe non-controlled sampling, but targeted sampling based on the partnership from MJ. So if we have a survey tool and we're able to actually monitor where the recruitment came from, it's okay afterward to be able to manage the sample and weight it and control for multi-frame sampling or whatever technique we need to do if we want to integrate everything. But for now, it's not representative of the full population. It will really target some vulnerable groups, and hopefully we'll be able to have some add-ons based on the targeted population. But it's not the case for the pilot. The pilot needs to be sufficiently diversified because we want to assess, which combination of questions, because this is a key element. For now, the task is to be as exhaustive as possible on the types of questions and on the anchors and all the features that we could address. But no way we're including this in a single survey. I mean, won't have any one answer. So we actually need to test combinations. And the combination will be, so maybe we will sacrifice one anchor for a scenario, or maybe we will sacrifice one perspective, or we will create a perspective where it's all about mismatch, or it's all about barriers, or it's all about dissatisfaction. This is what we need to test, but of course we need to make a selection. But the strategy right now is to code all the questions in the web survey and be able to create combinations. And we need more freedom to test. If we launch and we see that it's not working, then we need to change the sequence. But we have a core survey because we need all the variables to allow us to make classifications, and then we go to this central part of the satisfaction, barrier, mismatch, and everything. And regarding income, that's a good question because it's so first thing we know is that we don't ask income question at the beginning. We want it at the last section. That's always what we do. And then we need to see if, regarding the classes or the income after or before. And we need to check what StatCan does, but usually since we are using the StatCan data as weighting values, it needs to match. That's for sure. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's, well.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I see a question in the chat. Can someone please repeat the names of the previously available travel surveys just mentioned? So I mentioned the travel survey. So typically in a lot of metropolitan areas across Canada, there are regular cross-section travel surveys. So I know there is 6 regions in the Quebec province where we have cross-section surveys occurring every 5 or 10 years. There are, of course, one in Toronto. There is others across the country. So these surveys are usually, most of them are one-day trip diary, where people are asked what they did yesterday. So it's really a description of the typical travel behavior. In this case, we don't want typical travel behavior. We already have this. We're trying to fill the gap. So what is not measured, but we still need typical questions on age, gender, household size, location, driving license. All of this needs to be there for classification. But then we're trying to assess what is not measured typically in travel survey. So it's not about what people did yesterday. It's probably about what they more or less do. So we are able to understand their context, but then bring them on, dissatisfaction barriers, why the latent demand, suppressed, extra, all these elements. I see a physical raised hand.
Just to follow up on the questions you're asking as context, I didn't see anything on educational attainment or visible minority.
Oh yeah, well I mean, at this point, a lot of elements can be added in the first part as long as it's descriptive. We just need to make sure that it's not a sensitive question, and if it's a sensitive question, usually we ask it at the end. So we're sure that we're not. It's not an incentive to stop the survey. So that's why we have, of course, ownership of this. So level of schooling could be added because it's asked in the census. Same thing for
education on the
education and minority. Yeah, that seems probably education is less sensitive. Minority, we have to see where to put it, but it doesn't matter. So when we put it at the end, we actually accept the fact that some may not answer, but we still have the rest of the survey. So.
I'll just quickly jump in and add that I know in the GTA case, the household travel survey didn't actually ask about visible minority until this year. And this is the first year they're running it. So we'll be able to see how, the extent to which that question is skipped. So in my own experience, and I'm sure in many of the others who have done research on with that question, it hasn't been skipped that dramatically, but we'll have to see what happens when it's a big survey like that. Are there any other questions from the audience? I'll jump in with one for the national survey team. So you've done a lot of thinking of these different scenarios. Do you have any hypotheses yet about what you might find in the testing? Or any hypotheses about which sets of questions you expect will lead to a higher perceived burden versus a lower? And just curious to know what your thinking is.
Hedieh can, because she did I'll start and then I'll give you, so if we knew, we wouldn't go to pilot. But I mean, there are some key elements. So duration is part of the burden, but it's not the only thing. And these questions are a bit trickier because it's not about asking me, what I do. This is easy, but how I feel or, things I would like to have. I mean, it's a bit tricky because it increases the burden. It's not, I don't know what word to use in English, but it make myself question how come I choose something. So it may be uncomfortable. So we have to see how people behave. And for the selection of the question, of course, we're doing the national survey, so it can meet the needs of the entire MJ team. So we need to make sure it does. So that's another reason we do the pilot, because we will test proposed scenarios and we need to make sure that it allows us to measure what we actually want to measure. And one thing about the question we saw in the literature, I'm a bit critical about ways questions are sometimes formulated, because I was wondering, okay, we ask this question, we get this answer, but what do we do with this kind of answer? If we have if it doesn't provide us any way to actually recommend things or to be able to precisely understand the reason why this situation is observed, I mean, the question is not good. So I have to admit I'm a bit critical of some of the questions we found in the literature. So this is why it's a combination of things we've seen in the literature and things that hopefully will be better fitted to the needs of MJ project. Hedieh, maybe you want to come back with some burden elements, because some types of questions we know have higher burden.
Yeah, like what I can add is that like about burden, like one of the very important things is duration and is the subject. So about subject, because I have not able to find any like any review on like burden on a survey on transportation poverty. For now, I don't know like how people think like when we ask about like that they missed, how they behave and how burdensome it can be to them. What we see is that like what we can control in this point is the way we kind of compose the questions, we formulate them. That's why I said like I want them to be as easy as possible. So I am happy with this. So as you remember, we had some feedbacks that like satisfaction is not even a very like good phrase to use. It's better to use like happy or not happy. So what we want to do is that like be simple as we can, and on the other hand, make sure that what we ask, what we are asking is helping us to build indexes to measure things. So because like as Kathy mentioned, that there are some questions like I can easily go like somewhere, but like what? Okay, if somebody says no, I cannot go to school easily. Okay, why? We cannot kind of build indicators on this. We cannot measure anything. So this is like, we still don't know what combination we are going to use, but I think with the pilot, we understand which type of question can be burdensome. So we'll manage to put them in a way that we capture more data at the end, I can say.
Great, thank you so much. All right, last call for any questions from the audience. And if not, if we could just give another round of thank yous to our presenters in the session. This was really informative. We'll be going on a short break, and then a second session in this room will be about pilots that have been conducted across North America that we can hopefully learn from. Thanks, everyone, and see you at 1 o'clock.